Hey everyone, and welcome straight into the Explainer. Today, we're unpacking one of history's absolute most famous maritime disasters to solve a very specific mechanical puzzle. We're going to answer a question that's been debated for over a century. How exactly did the seemingly small size of the Titanic's rudder actually affect its ability to turn away from that fateful iceberg? Well, as you'll see, what you think you know might just be a total myth.
Right. So for decades now, there's been this incredibly persistent myth that the Titanic was just doomed right out of the gate by a severely undersized rudder. It's one of those stories that spread like wildfire and has basically entered the public record as an undeniable fact. But is it? Did a supposedly tiny rudder really seal the fate of over 1,500 people? Let's find out.
Okay, let's dive right into this. 101.25. That is the weight, in tons, of the Titanic's rudder. We hear the word small thrown around a lot in documentaries, but let's just contrast that word with the actual physical reality. This colossal piece of engineering was 78 feet tall. That's about the height of a 7-story apartment building. It was made of 5 massive, solid mild steel casted sections, all held together by these enormous forge bolts. So physically speaking, it was absolutely immense. But of course, size is relative to the ship it's attached to, right? To figure out the proper rudder size, naval architects back then compared its surface area to the longitudinal area of the ship's hull. So for a vessel that's 850 feet long with a draft of 34.5 feet, the standard maritime rules of the time dictated a surface area somewhere between 412 and 577 square feet. When you use Simpson's rules to calculate the uniquely shaped rudder of the Titanic, it comes out to exactly 401.6 square feet. So, technically speaking, yes, the rudder was smaller than the minimum calculated requirement. But here is the big twist. It was only about 11 square feet short of that optimal minimum. Think about that for a second. On a vessel 850 feet long, 11 square feet is a ridiculously slim margin. It's roughly the size of a standard door. That makes it highly, highly unlikely that this tiny deficit alone is what doomed the whole vessel. And you know, the historical record backs this up entirely. Quartermaster Robert Hichens, who was the actual man at the wheel that fateful night, he famously stated she was a good steering ship. In fact, during earlier sea trials, marine engineers explicitly noted how remarkably small the ship's turning circles actually were. She was considered incredibly nimble for a gigantic vessel and responded perfectly well to helm commands. So, if the sheer size of the rudder wasn't the main problem, what on earth was? Now, what's really interesting here is that the actual mechanical culprit lies at the very back of the ship, specifically with that massive triple-screw propeller setup. The issue wasn't the rudder itself at all. It was all about the flow of water moving over it. You see, the Olympic-class ships utilized what's called a triple-screw propulsion system. That means they had 2 outboard reciprocating engines and 1 central steam turbine. Crucially, that central propeller, the one powered by the turbine, sat directly ahead of the rudder, right on the center line. It was specifically engineered to blast a high-pressure slipstream of water right over the rudder, which massively increased its turning effectiveness. So what exactly went wrong down in the engine room the exact moment the iceberg was spotted? Well, it was a rapid, tragic sequence of events. Ice is spotted ahead, the bridge rings down to stop the engines to brace for or avoid the collision. But because the main engines stop, steam to that central turbine is instantly cut off. Suddenly, that central propeller completely stops providing thrust and just begins to coast. So by trying to slow the ship down, they unknowingly killed the vital thrust coming from that central turbine. And here is the devastating mechanical result of that action. That central propeller wasn't shaped like a sleek modern aerofoil. It was essentially just a big flat plate. So when it stopped spinning and started coasting to a halt, it acted like a giant metal shield. It actively blocked the flow of water, literally starving the rudder of its turning power. The ship's massive forward momentum kept it moving straight, but without that rapid wash of water flowing over the rudder, the stern just couldn't pivot fast enough to get out of the way. It's honestly heartbreaking because much of the turning force normally relied on that directed thrust. The human decision to stop the engines, which, let's be fair, is a perfectly logical, completely standard reaction to seeing a massive obstacle in your path, tragically robbed the rudder of its power exactly when the ship needed it the most. If they had just kept that central turbine energized, that slight extra kick of water over the rudder might have been exactly what was needed to ease the stern around the iceberg. But of course, in major disasters like this, it is rarely just one single thing that goes wrong. It's what investigators call the Swiss cheese model, which is how multiple compounding failures perfectly align to cause a total catastrophe. The compromised water flow over the rudder, that was just one slice of the cheese.
To really understand why the ship sank so rapidly, we have to zoom out and look at the metallurgy, specifically the very steel that held the Titanic together. The materials used by the builders back in 1912 tell a pretty chilling story that they couldn't have possibly fully understood at the time. The Titanic's hull was made of mild steel. Now at room temperature, this steel is highly ductile, meaning it bends and flexes under pressure. But out in the freezing -2°C waters of the North Atlantic, the steel crossed a critical temperature threshold. It transitioned from ductile to highly brittle. So when the massive weight of the ship sideswiped the unyielding iceberg, the steel didn't just dent or bend like it normally would, it was primed to just crack and shatter upon impact.
And this perfectly illustrates how these structural failures compounded so rapidly. The brittle transition curve of the Titanic's steel shows this huge, dramatic drop in impact energy at freezing temperatures. But it gets worse. Microstructural analysis of recovered wrought iron rivets actually showed they contained dangerously elevated levels of incorporated slag, literally more than 3 times the normal amount. Under the incredible stress of the collision, combined with those brittle hull plates, the heads of these flawed rivets literally popped right off under the pressure. It essentially unzipped the seams of the hull, allowing the freezing ocean to just pour right in.
And sadly, the story of that compromised metal doesn't even end in 1912. Discovered deep in the Atlantic back in 1985, the Titanic is currently undergoing massive rapid decay. Deep-sea metal-eating bacteria are actively consuming hundreds of pounds of the exact same iron and steel that failed that night every single day. The crow's nest is already gone, the iconic mast has collapsed, and modern expeditions are literally racing against time to map the site before the whole ship just vanishes into a rust stain on the ocean floor.
So what do you think truly sealed the Titanic's fate? Was it the 11 square feet of missing rudder area, the freezing brittle steel, and those slag-filled rivets popping off? Or was it the split-second human operational choice to pull the engine telegraph to stop, inadvertently killing the ship's ability to turn in those critical final seconds? It's a haunting reminder of how complex engineering and human decisions deeply intertwine in moments of sheer crisis. Keep questioning the history you think you know, and I'll see you in the next explainer.